Well, hello, everybody. This is Mike Chiarelli, and tonight I'll be talking about light painting, the equipment, and also how I do it in Photoshop. I first want to give a quick introduction to who I am. I started digital photography professionally around 2010, 2015, got an associate degree. I joined Professional Photographers America, and then 2017 and later, I joined some local affiliate clubs. I'll jump back to 2013. That's when I received my associate degree. And then in 2021, I received my craftsman degree during a virtual ceremony. That's when I joined ASP, American Society of Photographers. And I do have active role in help people learn still life photography, both at American Society of Photographers and also Professional Photographers America. So, I've been hooked on still life photography since 2015. And tonight, and we're going to talk about light painting, which is about the equipment and what you can use to modify the light and make the light more flattering, like pipe filters, adapters, like duct tape, black mode tape, like Cinefill, like plastic fusion scrims, white fusion scrims. And you can use black cards to create nice backgrounds. You can also use white or silver cards if you want to add a little light in the base shot. So we have a lot to cover tonight. And you can buy a lot of this at a department store, and also online, like Home Depot, like Micro Center, like maybe even a grocery store like Safeway. I'm going to quickly show my portfolio. So we're going to go over this image. We're going to go over this image, and then how I turn this into a cool black and white, just for some actions that I created. So this is one way an environment could look like when you light paint, where we have a small table, we have a dark background. We could also have a black foam board or a black cloth background. So there's many dark backgrounds you can use. And I recommend for still life that you use like a small LED flashlight between maybe 180 and 120 lumens. Lumens can go higher. And then the larger lumens flashlights you could use for outdoors. But tonight I want to talk about filters and also adapters. It's called the Harold Ross adapter, and I'll talk about that later. And they really help make the light look flattering. They help you control the light. And there's ways to use the flashlight, and there's ways not to use the flashlight. And these filters and adapters, they work well with any LED flashlight, as long as the flashlight can fit in the filter or the adapter. And it'll help you soften the light. And I'll talk about duct tape, black mold tape tonight. Sometimes the light's so powerful, like with the Godox lighting stick, I'll talk about it later. You want to use like a scrim. This is light painting indoors, but then if you light paint outdoors, it's a whole different story.
Can I just ask you, what is a scrim?
This scrim, suppose you have something shiny and the light is too powerful, so you put a scrim in front of the lights. Okay. There's also a way to add light too. Like when you have sunlight, you could bounce in light in from the window if you want to put a little detail in the shadow. So if you have any questions, just feel free to ask. So does this answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So this is a powerful, lighting, the Godox lighting stick. Some people, it's like, I sometimes call it the LC 500, but this is a powerful stick. It's great for outdoors. And this white paper is to make the light even more powerful when you light paint a car. And you can do a lot. You can put it on a pole. You can extend the pole. You can close the barn doors. You can open the barn doors. When you light paint outside, you want to keep it open. You want to have white paper or tough paper so the light will magnify. So you make it this light bigger. And it comes with a rechargeable battery. It can be used with handheld. You can also mount it on a light stand. You can just make it bigger. It has a flexible Kelvin temperature range. I always set it to 56K. And the barn doors, which are here, they're great for, like, if you lose it indoors, you can create a nice vignette for your base shot. So this LED light's great for light painting anything big. You can also, it's also great for creating a cool background. You close the barn doors and you have the thing on the floor. Or you could raise the thing on a stool, depending on what you want to do. This is another powerful LED light. It has 600 LEDs, and the light's balanced at 56K. And I always use it with the 3-prong plug. I have not used it with the V-mount battery, but it can be done. But these V-mount batteries can be pricey. And the snoot stock, which is here, they'll affect the light 3/4 of a stop. So it can help make the light a lot more flattering. And if you look at the lower right corner, it's with the snoot stock on. And if you look at the lower left corner, it's with the snoot stock off. So when you light paint with this, you always want to have this on to make the light look more flattering. This is another LED light. It's 216 LED lamps. And the light's balanced at 56K. It has a power dimmer, and the light before this has a power dimmer too. And it can run by 6 AA batteries, but I recommend that you get the Watson charger and the Watson battery. And you can light paint for a long time with this battery. And if you look at the lower right corner here, is with the clear filter on. If you look at the lower left corner, is without the filter. When I first started using it, I was using it with the batteries, but then I decided to buy the plug, which I had to buy separate. And this is great because it comes with an adapter, because you need an adapter for the power dimmer. And the other light, this has a power adapter in it for the power dimmer. And I recommend using either with a cord or this Watson battery charger and battery. This is another LED light. Thank you for joining this. This is being recorded. Comes, everything you see here, you can buy this at a hardware store. This will firelight at a narrow beam. This is great if you want to light paint a tree or a car. And you could do maybe a wheel of a car, but there's a better light than this. But this is if you want to light paint a distance, like a rock or the branches of a tree. And it's a rechargeable in battery. You can light paint for, you can probably for an hour, but make sure you charge it before you use it, because there's only so much electricity in a rechargeable AM battery. It's a Defiant LED light. This is another powerful gun light. The lumens is about 1,000 lumens. This is a powerful LED light. This is great for landscaping a difference. And it comes with the charger wire, but it doesn't come with the charger box. But you could buy one of these like for 15, 25 bucks or 10 bucks at a department store like Target. But this is a great light. You want to make sure you charge it before you use it. into rechargeable EM battery like the preceding light. And you could, light paint for maybe several hours. And then make sure you charge it before you use it, make sure it works. And you could do like large, non-metal objects or like trees or rocks. That's the Everstart LED light. This is a Savage LED 204. This is a nice soft LED light. This is great if you want to have a soft appearance on what you want to light paint, like the wheel of a car. Like if you don't have, like shiny, if you don't have like texture, you want to use this. And it comes with charger, everything you see here except for the case. You could mount this on a stand. You could put this in a camera, a hot shoe of a camera. And all the LED lights that I'm talked about, you could also, mount to like a 3/8 stud stand. So for the light paint outside, like the wheel of a car, I would not use white reflector scrim. But if I light paint indoors, you want to put like a white reflective scrim so the light's not powerful and it's more pleasing and more flattering. There's a flexible, temperature range, 30K, 56K. But I always have it at 56K because that's the natural daylight temperature. This is another LED light. And it's powerful, 150 lumens. It's a nice soft LED light. It's like the other one, has an AC adapter. Use the LC type battery and also the battery charger. And like the other LED lights, this can be screwed on a 3/8 stud stand. It has a flexible, color temperature, but I always have it at 56K because 56K is natural daylight. It has a flexible power control. But if I'm using this outside, I would use it without a screw, but inside I would use it with. So, because when you're outside, it's a lot darker. When you're inside, you're in a closed space. And it can be dark inside too. So it's worth experimenting these LED lights with the screw and without a screw to get the effect that you like. This is a great, nice, soft LED light. CRI means color render index. It means that 95% of the colors are accurate. So when you get a LED light, you want to try to get in that range, like 92 to 95%. And you can go from 0 to 100% in dimming. And as a flexible, temperature in like the other LED lights, you could have, 56K. I always have 56K because it's natural daylight. You can fit this in, any hot shoe of any digital camera, but I always have this mounted on a stand. And it comes with a charger and it comes with a battery. So this all comes with one kit. It also comes with like a little tripod stand if you want to put this, if you want to stand the thing up without a stand. This is a great light for like if you want to light paint the wheel of a car, something that's a shiny, because it has like a nice soft light appearance. These are all my LED lights, and this one's a good one. This one could be used without a screw when you'll want to paint, the lights of a car. But when you light paint still life, you want to use the adapter, you want to use the filter. And sometimes I use this light with the filter for certain things, and this light with the filter for other things. And then I have my Godox lighting stick for the backgrounds. So a good, a LED flashlight between 100 and 300 lumens, it helps me do my job. Then large ones, it's 2,300 lumens. So there's many kinds of LED lights. Some have more power lumens than others. And lumens is how you measure the power of the LED light. These are some tools that I use to build some filters. Where we have a PCP pipe, we have a sand block, we have a hacksaw, and this hacksaw can cut through anything. Then you have duct tape, where you want to saw like a 45-degree angle, and you want to have duct tape attach it. But you just use black molding tape, because when you use black molding tape, the white filter won't be straight light in the photograph. And the sand block, which is here, it's used to soften the edges. And these PCV pipes, they make a great filter, like an adapter, which I'll talk about later. Basically, you just measure the diameter of the flashlight, and then you just go to the hardware store and find the PCP pipe that's curved like this, that has the same diameter. And then you can do a hacksaw to cut the 45-degree angle slant. You can get all this at any major hardware store. Here's what my filters look like. And I decided to cover them up with black so that the white won't get in the shot. And I buy a lot of this from Home Depot. There's also a store called Ace in Chincoteague. They sell this too. So any hardware store will sell this. And the black mold tape is so that it works better in the dark. A lot of times I just use like a small LED light. I don't even use a scrim, because these filters will help soften the light. And the more you control the light, the better file you work with, and also it'll be easier to work with Photoshop, where you just won't work with a file if it's not properly exposed. If it's overexposed, forget it. This is the Harold Ross adapter. You could use it in the ETAC flashlight. You could use it in any flashlight that fit in with the adapter. You put this on the flashlight and you just screw on the filter. And this is the left and this is the right filter. And it's comes with a spare screw, but if you lose a screw or screws, just use another screw. Everything's black and it just has the white. So this is great for any LED flashlight that could fit in the diameter here. It's great for, making the light flattering. So these are with the LED lights with the filters attached. You just attach the filters. Now this is a small police one. This is a great light. So has about 50 lumens, but because the lumens are so low, I don't even put a filter on it, but this is a good light. It can be used in many ways. Now, when you light paints, you could do two things. Every time you light paint, start with a gray card. You use your new light, use your new gray card. And then the better way, the quicker way, is you create a preset in Adobe Camera Raw. You can do it in Lightroom Classic, but I like Adobe Camera Raw. You take a white balance shot. So suppose you do 5 photos with this one photo light. You just load up the preset. You just set the white balance. Now talk about in a diagram how to light paint. You want to go slowly for more texture, quicker for less texture. You definitely want to think of the direction of the light. Thanks for joining. This is being recorded. Let's see. You want to think of the edges of what you're trying to light paint. You want to shoot with a full battery. So you want to have all your batteries charged. Well, some people buy the battery grip extender. I don't, but if that's what you do and you like that, use that. You want to shoot with the full battery. You want to make sure your LED flashlights work. And make sure the LED lights are with fresh batteries. And have an extra set of batteries for the camera and LED lights. Now, to keep the camera still, I recommend a remote where you can just go to the timer option, you press it and timer goes, and then when you stop, you press it and then the exposure is over. These are with the LED lights with the filters, and the light is a lot less harsh. And when you use the filters, you'll light paint better and differently. You want to use a filter every time you use a small LED flashlight for still life. And look at the lights without the filters. See how harsh the light is? But indoors, I'd recommend a filter, but if you want to light paint outdoors, because it's a lot darker and it's a lot bigger environment, then you don't want to use a filter. And these are all my presets. The presets on the right mean with filter. The presets without filter, the ones on the right are without the filter. Ones on the left are with the filter. So, a lot of times when I do still life, I'd use the power with the filter and then another with the filter. Then I use the Godox closed and without a filter. But there was light painting outdoors. Sometimes you could use a powerful E-Tac without a filter. And then you want to use the Godox lighting sip without the scrim or filter. You want to use it with the white tough paper so that the light's even bigger. And you can light paint something really big like a dark car. And these are the camera cases. They're significantly less than the average. These are computer cases, and they're less than the camera case. Like, for the price, a lot of this is coming down. They're small, they're tough, and don't take up a lot of space, and they'll last for a lifetime. These are all my stands, where I have big boom stands. I have ground stands. A lot of times I bring when I lay paint outdoors, I bring many impact 3/8 stud stands to hold the light. So I'm about 4 of those because I want to attach all the lights. So I could just put the light on the ground. And sandbags are great for, holding a tripod or also the boom stands. You had silver white reflectors, like in the base shot of a still life. Sometimes I just use a silver reflector just to bounce more light in the shadow. Then when it gets real dark, I take away the filter. I take away, the white card. Because it'll be dark and and then you don't need any type of filter because you'll be light painting certain parts of the photograph with the LED flashlight with the filter. These are snoots.
I'm watching.
Good for product photography. These are good for a big light. And you can also put duct tape to make the light more narrow. And I'll talk about the 4-degree angle at a diagram later in the presentation. These are crates, the whole things. Also, you can put a light. Sometimes managers get rid of these, so I grabbed a few. These are blocks where you saw in the other photograph, they store the stands. You can also stand this up where you put the foam board and rest it against the table. I like to make still life tables. And sometimes people give away wood, and I took some wood. I got some angle brackets at Home Depot, and I put all this together. And these are sturdy, they're good. And these are cubes where you can buy these at Target. You can turn this into a table. You can put a small foam board or a fancy shelf board for a table. And you can do the same thing with stools. These arms were the part of the chair was coming apart, but I didn't want to throw the chair away. So I sawed off the broken arms with the power saw. And I made many more tables and turntables because what happened was I was trying to make my studio bigger and I wanted to find a piece of wood and I didn't feel like driving to Home Depot. I wanted to see what I had. Well, I couldn't find a piece of wood, but I decided to look at some wobbly bookcases. So I took apart the bookcases. I took everything apart and then I built all these tables and turntables and very tall tables. I also use black Kona stain because it makes the wood look nice. But sometimes I like to light paint something big and I may create something like this. Yeah, furniture shelf wood. This is another way to make a table. You just rest a board on the stool or the cube. And then placemats. And this is great for if you want to use like a bottle and a wine. I'd recommend using like a dark board or a dark placemat to help the subject stand out. And I also recommend that you don't use like patterns because this could be a distraction. And then you have background drops. I recommend like a dark backgrounds. You also have foam boards. It's great for creating like a black backgrounds. And foam boards can come in many sizes. And there's other ways you could use foam boards too in other still life photography. But since this is light painting, I just use like a foam board for like a big foam board for the, black or brown background. And these are backgrounds. I got this at Imaging in 2023. It's a nice background. It doesn't wrinkle. You don't have to wash it. And the same thing with this. So these are both good backgrounds. Both are wrinkle-free, and you almost don't need to use an iron if you need to get out the wrinkles, but there's ways to get out wrinkles with a steamer, but these are very good quality backgrounds. You got homemade rack. I made this because I store a lot of stuff. I used to store all my stands. Now I store all my foam boards, but I also used to make this as a background where I extend the poles so you get a nice wide background, but a dark black drop with spring clamps to attach the poles. This is a floor rack where I bought a new dishwasher, but I did not want to throw this away. But I did screw on a piece of wood. So if you want to have the light at an angle, aiming up, you can create a nice, cool vignetting effect. Your expansion poles, where if you want to use C-clamps to hold a scrim or a foam board, or you can also have, these are CG clamps, but you also have spring clamps just to attach like a dark background. And these are great. You could adjust the sizes. These are 1-inch poles. These are expandable poles, and these poles are great for just holding up a background. You could use it in a rack. You could use it. You could also use like special clamps and stands to hold this, and you could just clamp on the background with spring clamps. These are big black card bees where it's great to make the area dark. You could also put this in a corner. If you want to have a portrait stand, it's also good for like natural light. So there are many ways I could use these bees. These made out of stretch art frames and also canvas paper. plastic sturdy canvas paper. These are my scrims where these are stretcher art frames. And this is just a frame you could buy at like any department store, like Michael's, like Target. And this is the paper, well, the fusion paper is the drafting fusion paper you buy at an art store. You can also buy the fusion paper online at BH. These are my two big scrims where I'm gonna sort of not make the light harsh. You can just put the scrim in front of the window. You can also put the scrim in front of the light. So there's many ways I could use these big, 6-foot scrims. And it's just wood from Home Depot, and it's, L brackets that are screwed onto the wood. And this is tracing fusion paper. And you can also make a nice cool backgrounds. And you can just lean this against the table. You don't need to use a stand for this. And these are the lenses that I use. A lot of times I use a 35, but I use all these lenses. And I use mostly prime lenses for my still life and light painting. Outdoors, I use 7200 to 100-400. I like the prime lenses because they're the sharpest in focus and they're lower in price. But the zoom, with the technology today, they're getting better and better. I use now two cameras, the R6 and the R5, and I'm very thankful for the Canon converter because I can use all my non-RF lenses. And I recommend either the R5, R6, or the R3. I forget things about the R7. I see that you can print from the camera, but I don't think you can do it from the R6, R5, R3. But technology is changing, so just make sure you read your documentation and understand what you want. But I like the R5, R6, and I have a YouTube video on this, on the R6, and a YouTube video on the R5. Now, the image stabilization, that could cause a fiber reduction. I always turn it off because I always want to try to use a properly exposed image. But if you use it with the tripod, turn it off. If you don't use a tripod, turn it on, but I always have the image stabilization turned off because I never use it. And for the manual focus autofocus, for light painting, I start with an autofocus, I get a nice sharp focus, and then I switch it to the manual focus. So the camera doesn't have to think, it'll just take the shot. And these are my camera cases for the lens. And I bought these camera cases at a store, Micro Center. And again, they're like the other case I talked about, they're 3 times less than the average camera case. They're sturdy and tough, and they'll last a lifetime. Tripods for indoor still life, I use my stand. For outdoors, I use a tripod. And I always start with ISO 100 using a tripod. Without a tripod, I could go up to 3200. I could go to 64, but I like it to be 32. And I always use a cable release for a remote to keep the camera still, and basically all my still life and light painting photography. So this cable release works with a 70. It also works with the R5. So it's really the R5 and 70, they use the same cable release. And a cable release on the left works only with the R6. Sometimes I just use a cable release when I'm outdoors or even still life indoors. And I recommend a remote. Just, make sure you understand the modes. I'll talk about that later. I recommend either the remotes And this works in my 7D. It also works in my R5. And it works on, 4 AAA batteries. So this is basically the same release as this, but the wires are different because this is for the R5 and this is for the R6. Because it's basically the same, remote release, just with a different wire connecting to the camera to the receiver here. And it's with, I'm not going to go 80 meters distance, but I'm like maybe 15 feet away. But it has about 30, channels to work with. It has a great timer, and I recommend using the timer with the remote. You just get to the timer mode, you just push, it'll start timing, you do your thing, and then you're done, you push it again. This is a lot more flexible than a cable release, and this will fit in almost any Canon or whatever camera is designed to be used. So this will work with many hot shoes, these transceivers. There's also computer cable, where this is the booster cable. This will work with the R5, R6. This will work with the 7D. But there's also a better way to do this. But sometimes I do use cable from time to time, but lately I've just been using something called Wi-Fi, where I'll talk about that next. It's also another way. I thought it was, well, maybe it's down further. Okay. This is a light painting diagram where when you light paints, you want to think of angles, the edges. You want to have the light not facing you. That's why you want to change the angle of the filters. So again, when you use a new light, use a new gray card, just remember the light you use and just bring up the preset in Adobe Camera Raw or Lightroom Classic and just sync the white balance. So when a light paints, you want to be close. You want to make sure your remote's working. You want to think of the edges. You want to light paint in different angles. Now we're going to talk about the camera settings, and I think the Wi-Fi we'll talk about later in this presentation. The general, camera diagram. For regular still life, you use manual, but for light painting, I have it the bulb. Now I always want to have my ISO 100, and I want to be aperture 16. And I'll talk about all these settings. I'll talk about the Wi-Fi. This camera can record, can record the feed down to the 2 cards, both the R5 and R6. And I always want to shoot in RAW. The smallest JPEG is just for the Wi-Fi. I don't pay attention to that. My phone pays attention to that when I use the Wi-Fi. And then I use a DNG file for editing after I convert it from the CR3 file. I always want to be in the single drive mode. I want to take one photo at a time. For light painting, I don't want to use the H continuous or H low speed. I don't want to use a multiple shutter. These modes are good for other reasons, but not light painting. And the timers are great for self portraits, but not light painting. So I always want to be in the single shooting mode. I always want to use a standard. It applies a little sharpening to the image. Portraits, landscapes are great, but I feel like this is sharper. But these portrait landscapes are also good too for their specific area of photography. And then you have neutral, where no settings are applied. And the monochrome, where you alter the pixels to grayscale, but I recommend just using standard and doing all the black and white either in Camera Raw or Adobe Photoshop. And then you have the user settings, like if you're doing outdoor wildlife, you could have one setting, another set of settings. So you have three, you could have three user settings on this, well, in any digital camera, modern digital camera today. Now, I always like to use the AF method. All these methods are great. Where it's called the zone autofocus, where you focus on parts of the photograph, not just one part. Like you might focus where the subject is. The vertical and horizontal. I've tested all three of these, but I recommend just the zone autofocus. And then you have the 1053.8, and it's a lot big upgrade from the 19.7D. I like the zone autofocus because I feel the camera resets quicker than the 1053, but I've also used 1053. I had no issues. It's like the focus mode on the mirrorless is like a step or a few steps up from regular digital cameras. And then you have the single point of focus, and then you have the spot autofocus, great for macro photography. And then you have tracking, which is here, where you can enable the subject to people, you can enable the eyes. I know some people don't like it. I don't notice too much of a difference where, but I tried doing portraits with it and without it, and I think it's about the same, but I've used, with this on and with this off, and I don't see too much of a difference, the track. I recommend for the white balance either a natural daylight, or you can come over here and set the Kelvin to 5600 to 5400. Now, I never use the AWS, and because it's the least natural, and you're adding artificial color into the photograph, and AWS looks like the least natural. I mean, if you have specific light balance needs, I'd recommend a setting, like if you want a shade, use the presets. And I recommend just, for all my still life, I just like to set the white balance at 54, 5600K. Then there's a custom white balance where you take a picture of a white card, but if the light changes, you got to get it, you got to need a new custom white balance. And that's why I just want to set the Kelvin at 56K. And then the ISO speed noise reduction, I would disable this or maybe use low, because with the properly exposed image, you don't need this. Now, technology today, maybe you could use it standard with the very high ISO, but I wouldn't use it. It's settings you don't need to use, but if you have a specific need, they're there. The settings are there. Disable, the long exposure noise reduction, I would just disable it. And you disable it for properly exposed image, it's better than auto, and it's also way better than enable. Where if you enable it, it may take the camera a while to get back to this, beginning screen. Like if you're doing fireworks, you could miss a fireworks shot while it's trying to reset. And that's why I just rather, maybe have it auto, or I always have it at disable. Color space, where I like to start with the Adobe RGB, and you have over 57 billion colors to work with. And then when you convert it to sRGB, then you're stuck with 60.7 million colors. And I use the sRGB when I copy and paste in Photoshop. I want to make sure I don't have that convert the sRGB profile checked, but if I post on the web, I do. Because when I checked it, when I copy and paste in Photoshop, it gave me a color mismatch. I decided to experiment. I decided to process the JPEGs without checking the sRGB profile. I didn't get that color mismatch problem. I know some, people maybe work with ProPhoto, that's 281 trillion colors. Now keep in mind that the human eye can only recognize 2 or 3 million colors. Now, when you prints, then you're only stuck with 16 colors. But I just start with, Adobe RGB, and I use sRGB in 2 ways. Cropping aspect ratio, if you're using full frame, full will be the best because you're using all the pixels, you have complete pixel powers. You're getting the strength of all the pixels. Now, the 1.6, that's great for the sensor C lens, but you're not using the complete picture power. And the other 1:1, 4:3, 16:9, they're great for specific needs, but again, you're not using the complete pixel power for the full. That's why I always want to use full. An exposure, auto exposure bracketing, where they have a stop regular exposed and under and over. So when I do outdoor photography, I want to expose for the highlight. I want to expose for that stop. So the overexposed stop, there'd be no blinkies, so I can work with all the pixels. Now I know in the R5, R6, you could have more than 3 files. You could have 9, you could have more than that, but you still want to use 3 files, regular, under, and overexposed. Now the continuous focus, you should disable it because you're in control of the focus when you press the focus button. If you enable it, the camera is always going to be focusing. Another way to turn this off is you just switch the focus to manual, but it's always better to disable this. You're in control of the focus than enable it when you don't have control of the focus. Well, sometimes when the R6, they had this enabled, but the R5, they didn't. Just want to make sure this is disabled. I use 1/3 exposure increments also for the ISO. I always use 3 bracketed shots. You can use many more than 3 shots. There are many ways to record data on both the R5, R6. Both cameras use the XC and HC ending cards. The XC cards are a lot quicker than the HC. It's a lot more speed and a lot more storage. I mean, 2 terabytes is a lot more than 30 gigabytes, and 100 megabytes is 10 times faster than 10 megabytes. But both the R5 and R6 use both of these cards. Now the R5 the Type B memory card only can be used on R5 because the R5 is really made for video and data. So this is really the video card, but you can also record data too. The Type B memory card, it's great for capture of 4K and full HD video. There's all types of memory space cards you can buy, but check your prices and do your research. And the cards have great speeds. You have, 1800 megabits per second, or also maybe write speed of 1000 megabits per second, but you could have greater speeds with more advanced cards than this. Now you could record to 1 card, you can record to 2 cards. You can also, when 1 card's out, you can go to card 2. And some people, and I do this in lifetime trips, is you have 2 cards. This would be 1, this would be 2. If I delete a file on card 1, card 2 will still have the file for backup. So when you delete a file, you only delete it from 1 card. Now the image quality R5, which is here, and the R6 is the R5. I use a JPEG for Wi-Fi. I don't even touch this file. And I use a C RAW, condensed RAW. And for the R6, I use a small JPEG. I don't touch this. and I use a raw file, and I both convert both raw files to the DNG files, and I do all the editing there. And the DNG files are easier to work with. Windows Explorer loads them up a lot more quicker, and they come up quicker and they work better. And then the Wi-Fi is where, and I did a whole nother presentation on this, is you want to make sure you enable this and you turn off your airplane mode. You cannot use both. That's why you want to have the Wi-Fi settings enabled and the Bluetooth enabled, and the nickname my camera, which is R6. And this is what the camera looks like when you're trying to connect, where they'll tell you to go to the Wi-Fi section of the camera, and then the Wi-Fi section will tell you to go to the Canon Connect, and you connect, and you just wait for the connect. Now I'm going to do a demo. Well, what does RF mean? It's a type of mirrorless camera. We have the R6, R5. They use as notation on lenses. That means it's a mirrorless lens. Now I'm going to go to the Adobe Bridge, where I did a workshop in John Hartman. Where the final product will look like this. And this is the frame, but first we're going to have a raw demo. Where I select the best JPEGs. I select them all. And then what I do, since this is the ETAC Lite, I open in Camera Raw. Do Control A, so I'm selecting all the files. And then I'm going to load settings. I'm going to find the ETAC. Then I open, and then I click Done. Do the same thing with this. I'm going to select a few, but I select all the files. I open in Camera Raw. I do Control A. I come over here and I find without the filter. And I click Open, and then I click Done. And I'll talk about how I did the JPEGs later. Do the same thing where JPEG is just for the Wi-Fi. I don't even touch those. There's a master art file. Frame. So I use basically two lights. And these symbols here means it's the white balance settings affected. But opening Camera Raw. And I find the preset and I click Open and I click Done. Go to the next lighting stick. I'll select all files. Go to opening camera raw. Do Control or Command A. And then I find open without scrim. I click open and then I click done. I do the same thing with this. Select all files. Those are 4 files. I would do select Control Command A. Load settings. Find the filter, find the preset, click open. And I do the same. With this. Here's a finished image. So I would do this with every light that I use. Open the camera raw. Do Control A. Load settings. And find the filter. I can't remember which one, but I would know that I click open, then I click done. Now to get these JPEGs, what I would do is I'm gonna do a new screen share. Well, everyone's tired. I yawn too, but I'm not gonna worry about it. I'm gonna go back to presentation. When I convert to JPEG is I already made the processes. I don't have to even check this off. Because I want to make sure that I do not have this checked if I'm going to copy and paste in Photoshop. For the post on the web, I would, but since we're copying and pasting in Photoshop, you don't want to have this checked. And that's how I use the image processor to process all the JPEGs. You can do the same thing in Lightroom too. Now we're going to go to, let's see, Adobe Photoshop. I'm going to open up a JPEG. I'm going to open any JPEG because what I do is what I'm going to do. I'm going to disable everything. So the first is to get this, I use, let's see, I got to put my actions. I click on this, I click Mace Player, and that's how I get this. Now, when I get this, I open up a brand new JPEG and I select what I want to light. I do Control Command C.
Hmm.
Then the action paste in place. I just run this action. And when I paste in place, I'm always using an edit, paste in place. And I always want to I always want to end in the lighten blend mode. So I would open up another JPEG, I'd copy what I want to see, and then I would run this action to paste it. Now, when I do my light painting, I always want to make sure I'm in the layer mask because I'm painting white in a layer mask. I want to reel the light I want to see. And if I paint too much, I could just push the X key and I paint. And when I concentrate on the subject, I push the X key again and it switches to white. So I would, that'd be a new JPEG. I would copy what I want to see, Control Command C. I would run this action, and then I would get this, where edit, paste in place, and light and blend mode. So all these are, open JPEGs, and sometimes you get many selections from a JPEG. You could have combined selections too. And then when I want to light paint in the background and the brush I use, soft brush. I always want to use a soft brush. And I want to use the arrow keys, the French keys. They make my control the size of the brush. So, and then when I want to light paint the background, you want to have a flow of 4 or 5. When you're regular light painting, you want to have a flow of 15 or 16. But here I have the flow at 4 or 5%. This will help the subject stand out. I'm going to open up the frame photograph. Let's see. So you remember the file with all the layers. I would flatten the image, and then I would get just a background layer, and then I'd run some actions to sharpen it, like I'll go to my MFP filter folder, and these are filters that I made. MFP's me. Make the thing bigger. Where I'd run 3 actions for the background image sharpening. You have the speckle, which is the prompt, dust and scratches. Sometimes I would just use this one. I'd start with this. This doesn't have a prompt. Actually, this does. The speckle doesn't, but this does. I'd have it at 1.3. And then the high pass. High pass. I'd change it, and then the high pass. I would use a certain blend mode. The high pass, let's see. I'd use a soft mode blend light. Sometimes I'd use like fade, where I'd do edit fade, I'd use it another blend mode where I would use luminosity blend mode. I have actions for everything. I want to save it as a JPEG from Photoshop. I always want to export and save legacy, where you see the file sizes. You convert to sRGB because I'm posting to the web, and you see the file size. And open up another one. Let's see. I light painted a car where so this is the base action. What I'm doing when I run this base action, I run this. I drag the dark slider all the way to the left. It's a nice dark file. And then I would open up a new JPEG. I'd make a selection. I'd do Control Command C. And I do the paint in the mask. Make sure we're painting whites. Now, if I paint too much out here, I could just push the X key and just hide what I don't want to see. But every one of these photographs is a separate JPEG. Maybe 50 JPEGs. And this, where it's lightened, but I'd use flow of maybe I could use, depends on what I want to do. I may just keep it at 16 flow. And I have all these groups because I wanted to use an adjustment layer. See. An action that I use. With the other photograph, I'd flatten the image and I would just have a background. And this means I use the high pass filter. The blend mode is soft light. And then when I get this frame, I call this action, and then this action is called. When this action is called, he calls this action. When this action is done, and then the condition calls, where if the landscape, go to big width, if not, go to big height. And, big height and big width's up here. So when I use actions, I use them in groups and I call, and they're all my action folders. You do black and white, like use a simple black and white layer. And then that's one action. Where to get the other part of the action, I just run dark 7 and 8, and the many actions you can Google and they could. And then when I do this, just click on auto feature. And then I click over here. I just adjust it to what I want to see. So I would start with a blank layer. So all these are JPEGs that I copy and paste what I want to see. This is a JPEG. It just, it open up a JPEG. So basically, let me see. Lasso tool, if I want to select these strawberries, I do Control Command C. And then when I paste it, paste in place, and I always want it in light and blend mode. And then when I run the frame, I would have to flatten the image. Make sure that, okay. I would flatten the image. And then I have to flatten the image. So I use that special action in groups to get this. Reset my workspace. The high pass filter. And here's a white bound, the soft blend mode. Your screen share, let's see. So these are my Facebook groups. This group has about, this group will eventually have 2,000 members. They're still like fine art. I had a few members a day. The other groups are growing more slowly. And some of these are run by myself, some are with other people. These are my meetup clubs. These are my Facebook, my Instagram. My LinkedIn, my Twitter, my fine art site. I'm going to go to right now. The Father's Day sale special. My light paintings, my plexi work, my regular products. And my portfolio, which I showed you before. The work talked about. Here's my YouTube channel. Where in my playlist, I have a playlist section on equipments. And still life and light painting. I have light painting webinars, I have black plexi webinars, white plexi webinars, and also Adobe software webinars. So maybe consider like subscribing. I have a lot of tutorials on everything. Any questions? Quiet, but I guess there are none. If you have any questions, you can just email me at mpucciarelli2016@gmail.com, or you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. All right, so I'm going to end this webinar. Thank you for listening. Let's see. Yeah, you're welcome. And I will post the recording so you can listen to it again. Thanks for listening. I will post the recording soon.